Hello again, Troy Ackerman, alias Shadow Electronics here with you again. I started doing this art sound off, and as I was doing it, I came into a different direction. It's something that I thought I really wanted to talk about more. So maybe I'll get into that one another time. Maybe I won't. But there's something. But going through part of what I was trying to say reminded me of a pet peeve that I think I'd rather talk about. The concept of epic. And we've been seeing that a lot in comics, especially from DC and Marvel lately. Everything's playing to traits, or everything's got to be headed out multi-part storylines, and everything has to be this huge, epic, large story. Everything has to be larger than before. The status quo needs to be changed so many times that there no longer is the status quo. And sorry, I'm still a little stuffed up in here. But that to me is a mistake because I'm not going to say there's anything against an epic story. I'm sure there's one or two up here someplace. At least, and there are some epic storylines that I actually enjoy. A good multi-part adventure can be interesting. I grew up, well, yeah, no, technically I did grow up watching old movie serials, and those are multi-part, very long stories with cliffhangers and long story arcs and the MacGuffin and everything else. And so I don't have anything against a big epic story. I love Star Wars more than Star Trek. But at the same time, I think you can get so buried in doing epic stories that you kind of get lost in it. It's this thing where every story has to be larger and bigger and bolder. And not necessarily. I don't care that your next story is not as large as the last one. Is it a good story? That's what matters to me. And that's what matters on writing it. I don't necessarily need to do a really large story. I can just do, here's the story I want to tell, I'm going to tell it. And it doesn't have to be, the big, large, earth-shaking everything, because life is not like that. How many earth-shaking events do you have in your life? Good or bad? They're not that many. Most of the time, every day isn't as normal. But even in the life of a fictional hero, you can have these smaller adventures, so that when the big epic stories happen, they have more weight, they have more power to them, they're more interesting that way. When every story has to be the biggest story ever and bigger than the last story you've told, you lose something. You lose that connection point. You lose that universe. You lose a way to be drawn into this universe because all you're just watching is big, huge things happen one after another. And it's just not, to me, it's just not as interesting to just watch everything happen. Because the next one, if one isn't as large as the other one, it doesn't feel as good. But if you have these smaller but important stories, maybe a running subplot that leads into an epic finale, now that's interesting. Now it means something. Let me give you an example in pro wrestling. If every match was a steel cage match, who would care? What would make the steel cage match come out interesting? If every match, it's one of the reasons I don't watch wrestling now. Everything is almost feels like false count everywhere, no disqualification, and then that's every match. And that's why I never got into ECW. When every match is extreme, then eventually the extreme becomes the normal, and in writing, eventually the epic just becomes ordinary. And then you've got to try to do something larger. And you're going to kill yourself doing it. You're going to not be able to make good stories. As I said before, events control characters and characters alter events. But if you need to get invested in the characters to make the events interesting, and you need interesting events to make the characters interesting, it's a symbiosis. And when everything's epic, you don't have time to really connect to the characters because you're not seeing what their ordinary lives are like. And maybe their ordinary lives are still more extraordinary than yours are. I'm assuming that one guy who deals with bank robbers, giant robots, and outer space aliens, sometimes going back to their home planet, will have a somewhat more ordinary life than you, but but for them it's a kind of normal. So you get into this world, you get into these characters and into their lives. So that when some big earth-shattering thing happens, then all of a sudden it becomes this real exciting moment. You're really drawn and then you go back to having this nice normal life and normal things happening and everything until the next big epic event. So the epic stories matter more when they're rare, just like any kind of precious stone. It's the rarity that makes them more precious. That's why gold is more precious. Why diamonds are worth more, because can't just find diamonds in the wild. You got to go special places to find them, and so it makes them more interesting when they're rare. That's why some characters are not used all the time. So Batman doesn't fight the Joker every single issue, because this way, when the Joker does show up, you know the stuff's going down. You know that it's going to be a big adventure coming out. But now they're all big adventures and world-shattering events, and there's no status quo. There's no normalcy, and because everything needs to be larger than the last. I hear people complain that Iron Man 2 was not as good as Iron Man 1. Bull. I liked Iron Man 2 just as much as I did Iron Man 1. Yeah, you don't have Tony Stark going through the same problems he did last movie. He's trying to not die. He's trying to come to grips with the fact that he's not going to die. That's his character arc. Now we've seen his origin. We've seen him come together. We've seen him overcome his demons. Now he's got to try to find new stories. What do you do now that you have this new take on your life? That's where the interest comes from. And maybe it's not as maybe it isn't as big as the previous movie. Who cares? The point is that it's a good story, and that's what we should always focus on. Make good stories, not necessarily make the biggest stories or the most epic stories or the most earth-shattering stories. Make a good story. If it's some big major event, fine. If it's not, then it gives you a chance to zoom in this world, be drawn into this new reality, and make interesting characters, so that when the epic events hit, you give a dang. So don't be bogged down with the modern notion that everything has to be a large epic story. It can be. And I would never stop you from making it. I would never complain that you made it. But it doesn't have to be. Sometimes a smaller story can be just as interesting. And with that, I will again send you to leanintoart.com/artsoundoff to find out more about the Art Soundoff Challenge. Go to twitter.com/artsoundoff to see everybody who's taking part in it, or just use the Twitter hashtag #ArtSoundoff, and see what other people are saying about comic creators, people who've done more comics professionally rather than me doing them privately. And I'm doing this from the perspective of a critic who wants to become a better storyteller. And you can follow that progress as far as everything else is going on at bwspotlight.com. In fact, last night I posted my annual collection of some of my favorite articles, because I am now officially in my 8th year of BW Media Spotlight. So you might find that interesting, seeing some of the stuff some of my other ramblings. But I hope you check out more Art Soundoff. I keep forgetting to say this on Friday, so now I have a little extra time, so I'll say it here. I do take the weekends off because I have other projects that I really need to work on. The clutter cleaning project, some video work, other things I need to do around the house. So I will return on Monday with more Art Soundoff. Until then, happy creating.